Thank you everyone for joining us here today for Cultivating Authentic Leaders, the case for an LGBTQ+ leadership program. My name is Jacqueline Brinkhouse, and I'll be our webinar moderator for today. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items. A recording of this webinar will be sent to the email you used to register. It will also be available on the event registration page and our professional and executive development YouTube channel within a week. Please utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to ask your questions for our live Q&A session. If we do not get to your question, we will provide contact information for follow-up at the end of this presentation. On the next slide, we will quickly go over our agenda. We have a great session in store for you today. First, we'll discuss our upcoming LGBTQ+ leadership program, Leading with Pride. Next, we'll sample program topics with the expert in residence, Shawn O'Connor. We'll then conclude the webinar with a live Q&A session where you can ask Shawn your questions live. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Shawn O'Connor. Welcome, Shawn.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. It is great to be with all of you today. I am super excited to conduct this webinar and to share just a taste of what you can expect in our Leading with Pride professional development program later this summer. So by way of background, I have been teaching at Harvard for almost 7 years now. I teach both in professional and executive development, working with professionals of all different points in their career. I also teach in our Master's in Management program through Harvard Extension, and I teach strategy, marketing, entrepreneurship, as well as management consulting and business law. In my free time, I am the founder and CEO of DWUS Inc. It is my second large startup, and it is focused on teen and adult mental health. Formerly, I worked with McKinsey & Company as a consultant. Also worked with Lehman Brothers. I always like to joke that when I left, the stock was $65 a share, and I don't know what happened after that, but I know I'm not responsible. I've been in a number of different media outlets over the years. I used to be a regular columnist for both U.S. News and World Report and for Forbes. I've also been featured in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Bloomberg Business Week, Inc. magazine, where my former company was twice named to the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies in America. So I wanted to start with this sobering statistic. Sometimes, we get the idea that, at least certain segments of the LGBTQ community are very wealthy and very successful. And that is certainly true for some individuals. But economic opportunities are still, unfortunately, limited for many LGBTQ+ individuals, especially those who are women or who are part of another minority group. And so, a real point to our webinar today, as well as something that we're going to focus on during the full program in July, is to empower LGBTQ+ professionals to, really succeed both personally, professionally, and financially. Because as you can see from this slide, LGBTQ+ individuals still have a significantly higher rate of poverty than non-LGBTQ+ individuals. And it's really important that the LGBTQ+ community, of which I am a proud member, not only has opportunities for all of the rights that we have fought for over the last 50 or 60 years, like gay marriage and the right to adopt children, et cetera, but it's also important that we are on an equal playing field when it comes to professional opportunities and financial success. And so what we want to do through this webinar, and furthermore through the Leading with Pride program, is really to empower LGBTQ+ professionals with all of the tools that they need to be their very best selves, not only professionally, but also personally. And you'll see that as I give a bit of a taste of the program going forward. So if you'd like to join us for the Leading with Pride full 4-day seminar, that will take place July 15th to July 18th. I am the expert in residence, but I am joined by 3 other wonderful instructors as well. And we will meet on campus at Harvard in Cambridge for these 4 days, and we have a lot of cool things in addition to just the classwork. We're going to have a panel of LGBTQ plus successful leaders. We're going to have a couple of networking opportunities. There will be an optional dinner. So I think this is going to be a really great program, not only to hone your management and leadership skills, but also to have the opportunity to network with like-minded professionals who may be facing some of the same challenges and who have many of the same opportunities that you do. So we can all strategize together to strengthen the LGBTQ plus presence in the corporate and nonprofit world. The deadline to register is about 8 days before the program, so don't wait too late. You've got about a month from now to register if you'd like to join us. And again, the program is July 15th to July 18th in Cambridge, and the deadline to register is July 7th. And in the chat, we've posted a link for more information, and you can also scan the QR code on your screen if you'd like more information. So just to go into a little bit about what the whole program covers, and then I'm going to give you a taste of some of these modules. We are going to start on Monday with developing your leadership brand. And my colleague Andy and I will be taking you through these different sections. So Andy's going to talk about changes and opportunities for LGBTQ plus leaders, as well as how to build visibility and build your brand. And so he'll walk with you through those. And I should mention that all of the faculty for this program are members of the LGBTQ plus community. That was something, as the expert in residence who developed this program, it was very important to me that we be authentic in our leadership of this program. And then in the afternoon, I will be working with you on leading authentically and leading inclusively, and I'm going to give you a taste of those two topics at a very high level today. Then on Tuesday, my colleague Nancy will take you through navigating organizational contexts. And then my colleague Bob will take you through our negotiations work. And we'll really help you with organizational behavior, organizational culture, how to adapt to different types of cultures, how to shape the culture that you think would be best for the company of which you are a part or the organization of which you are a part. And then we've got some really practical negotiation exercises that I think you'll find super helpful in terms of how to best negotiate, not only for yourself, but on behalf of your organization. On the third day, on Wednesday, we're going to talk about mentorship and sponsorship opportunities. And today I'll give you a taste of this and talk about a little bit of the differences between mentorship and sponsorship. We'll talk about also how to find career development opportunities for yourself. And then we'll have some strategic networking advice that I'm going to give a taste of today. And we'll conclude the day on Wednesday with a panel discussion with some pretty prominent Boston-based LGBTQ plus leaders that I know that you'll enjoy. And I'm most excited about Thursday because throughout the whole program, you will be doing exercises that will help you to put together a personal action plan. So we don't want this leadership program just to be generally about, oh, let's talk some about negotiation, let's talk some about strategy. We really want you to walk away with an action plan. And so much of the day Thursday is going to be dedicated to helping you hone that individualized and personalized action plan that you can take with you back to, back to your organization, back to your work, as well as to have in your personal life to map out how you are going to reach the next step and the next step that you are looking to achieve professionally. At the beginning of the day on Thursday, we'll also cover some of the keys of strategy, which is kind of my topic of greatest academic interest in teaching in the master's program at Harvard. So we'll start with that, but most of the day on Thursday is going to be focused on that kind of short and long-term career action plan that I think you're going to find super useful. So I am the expert in residence. I will be with you all 4 days, but I wanted to introduce my colleagues as well. And I think what you'll note is that all of us have some nonprofit experience as well as for-profit experience. So I was the former board co-chair of the Center on Colfax, which is Colorado's LGBTQ plus center. Andy does a lot of work in journalism about the LGBTQ plus community. And then Nancy is a commissioner on the Massachusetts Commission for LGBTQ plus youth. And Bob is a member of the LGBTQ plus Commission for the City of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Andy also teaches at Berkeley's Haas School of Business and is the founder of a startup in the data insights and business-to-business software as a service space. Nancy has had a long career that culminated with her being the president of Pearson's Teacher Education, Professional Development, and Student Success Division. So she can speak really well to different organizational cultures and structures and how to navigate those, because most of her career, unlike Andy and I, who are kind of more so entrepreneurs, Nancy very much climbed the corporate ladder very successfully. And then Bob is one of the nation's foremost experts on negotiations. He has taught for almost 20 years at Harvard Law School in their negotiation program that he helped to build and develop. And he is also the founder of his own negotiation institute in Cambridge. So I just wanted to let you know a little bit more about the teaching team that I feel really fortunate to have put together and to have worked with developing this program over the last year. So in terms of the modules, I already kind of alluded to these, so I won't belabor the issue, but we're going to get a taste today of authentic and inclusive leadership, personal branding. I'm going to leave the negotiation stuff to Bob, so you won't get a taste of that. Going to leave the organizational behavior and culture to Nancy, who's the expert there. So we won't do a taste of that today. But then we will do a taste of career development today and a taste of networking. And then strategy, which is an area of my expertise. I didn't include that for today just to keep the amount of content manageable so you can all have time to ask the questions that you'd like. And then we will have, as I said, panels and networking receptions. So there will be 2 networking receptions. You can see one from one of my former programs there. And there will also be a panel of for-profit and nonprofit LGBTQ plus leaders that will be at the end of the day on one of the days that we're there. So we'll have, I believe the panel is Wednesday afternoon, and then I believe the networking receptions are Tuesday and Thursday, but I could have that mistaken. It is correct on the website. Great. All right. So let's now get into a little bit of a taste of the topics that we will be covering during our program, so that you can have a sense of what we're going to be going. And I really want to leave you with some actionable things today. So this is not just about figuring out whether or not you want to do this program. Of course, we hope you'll join us, but it's also about you having the opportunity to learn some important, valuable things, even if you aren't able to join us in Cambridge this summer. So I have a poll that I want to start with today, and you can see it there. So the question in the poll, which we'll have live for you in just a second, is, does your current employer foster inclusive and authentic leadership? So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to go ahead and select your choice. Do you think your current organization, or if you're between organizations, your most recent organization, does this organization foster, and you can define this however you'd like, do they foster inclusive and authentic leadership, or is that not so much of a focus? Again, there is not a right or wrong answer here. All right, so 67% of you said no, that you don't think that your current organization. So 2/3 said that they didn't. So I'd love for you to post in the chat about why or why not. What are the things that you see in organizations that make you think, hey, this is not an inclusive environment. It is not a place where folks feel that they can be their inclusive and authentic self. So if you want to share some of those things, definitely, definitely don't be hesitant. And so Danielle shared, I don't see LGBTQ folks in higher leadership positions. And this is something I'm going to talk about in a second, right? It is hard as an LGBTQ plus professional to aspire to senior leadership, corporate leadership, or nonprofit senior leadership if you don't see anyone like you in senior leadership roles, right? And this is the case, this would be the same case for, if you're in an organization as a woman and there are no women in senior leadership, or there are no, if you're a member of the African American community or the Latinx community and you didn't see anybody in senior leadership, right? This can be quite concerning, quite discouraging. And other things that we sometimes see where people feel that it's not an inclusive workplace is that, we will see a lot of times sort of a discouraging of sharing anything personal in the workplace, right? That, oh, well, that's nice that you had a great date this weekend, but I like to stay just focused on the work, right? And sort of this, I don't want to call it a microaggression, though one could interpret it that way, but sort of this feeling that sharing, not overly personal details, but just things that you did this weekend with a partner or someone you're dating or your friends that might be, LGBTQ plus related, you just get negative feedback on that. Another thing you see, you'll see that everyone here, we've included our pronouns. When people ignore people's preferred pronouns, that obviously does not create a safe space. And so one of the things that we're going to learn about during the program is how can you appropriately advocate for and help create a more inclusive and authentic workplace. So first, we want to, and this will depend on, some people in this program may be more senior. A lot of you may be, in the middle of your career or a little more junior. But whatever we can do to sort of encourage leaders to bring their full selves to work is the first thing, as I was talking about. If you don't feel safe sharing like just general details of what you did over the weekend, that is not a place that, you're going to feel safe coming to, that you're going to feel excited to come to work every week, which has, huge issues for retention, which, even if we're being cynical, even if a company doesn't really care that much about your personal life, which would be sad, but is sometimes the case, there is a strong business case for having authentic leadership because it improves retention, and hiring people is expensive, training people is expensive. And so the ability to encourage leaders to bring their full self to work is important. And I see this often. Many organizations have employee resource groups, and they often have a women's employee resource group and an African American employee resource group, and sometimes people with disabilities or employee with disabilities resource group. It's important if your organization doesn't yet have an LGBTQ plus employee resource group to see if you could find someone, maybe if there's no one in senior leadership, maybe someone who's an ally in senior leadership, or maybe somebody in sort of middle management that could be the sponsor, and to start this employee resource group and then start the dialogue with senior leadership about why it's important to bring their full selves to work. Because there are ways that senior leadership, even if they themselves aren't LGBTQ plus, can show support. Many of them may have a child who's LGBTQ plus, or they, may have others in their lives, and sharing those experiences and how those experiences help them to relate to the LGBTQ plus community can be really valuable. And so these employee resource groups, if they are sort of effectively run and their potential is maximized, they create dialogue between the middle management and more entry-level employees and senior leadership around issues of importance to the LGBTQ plus community, whether that's non-discrimination provisions, pronouns, hearing from senior leadership about their support, pride festivities, benefits that, for example, my husband and I care a lot about fertility benefits right now. So all of these different issues, employee resource groups can help to surface those with senior leadership. At the same time, they also allow for networking amongst LGBTQ plus employees and allies so that they feel more comfortable, more supported by those around them at the workplace. And this has demonstrable impact, not only on retention, but also on mental health, which the better the mental health of the employees, the fewer days that people are out for mental health reasons, the lower the insurance cost of people needing mental health treatment. So there is a real strong business case to be made. So even if your company is not naturally inclusive for the sake of being inclusive, there are business cases. I already mentioned that these employee resource groups allow for relationship building, but they also foster creativity and innovation. Because if your business is relatively siloed or your nonprofit is relatively siloed, the employee resource groups are a way to cross-pollinate ideas across the organization. And so this all leads to enhanced organizational performance, a better reputation for the company that makes hiring and retention easier. And of course, nationwide now, because of the Supreme Court decision, companies cannot discriminate in employment based on gender identity or sexual orientation. And then many states have additional protections. And so these leading authentically helps to ensure compliance so that the company doesn't face any liability in terms of exposure as a result of not being a welcoming workplace. All right. When we talk about leading inclusively, it's similar to leading authentically, but authentically is bringing yourself to work. Leading inclusively is accepting others, right? And this isn't just accepting others who are completely different from yourself, but there is diversity within every community, right? Every lesbian woman doesn't see things the same way. Every trans individual is not going to necessarily have the same opinions, the same thoughts, et cetera. There's great diversity within groups as well as between groups. And leading inclusively means bringing down barriers, allowing for open communications, and surfacing the biases that we all have, because we all do come with biases. We have to combat those biases actively, but leading inclusively allows us to understand what are the barriers to being fully inclusive and what are the biases that could be inherent in the company or that individuals have. Because when you lead inclusively, you hear more voices in the conversation at work, and that leads to better decision-making. Also, leading inclusively is really important when you're trying to grow into new markets, whether new markets within the US, if you're based in the US, as well as new markets outside of the US. And so, for example, when you are trying to appeal to the LGBTQ plus community to market consumer goods, you certainly want to have LGBTQ plus voices in the room. It's just as when companies seek to deepen their relationships with the Latinx community in the US, they definitely need Latinx representation on those sort of marketing and sales teams. And certainly as you're going abroad into other countries, it's important to have a broad diversity of employees, many of whom may be from the country that you're trying to enter or the markets that you're trying to enter, so that when the company is speaking to customers, whether business to consumer or business to business, they are doing so in a way that is inclusive and that conveys authenticity. And so, as I mentioned, leading inclusively means figuring out those biases and addressing them, creating equitable opportunities, right? This doesn't mean that people get jobs, get promotions simply because of their identity, but that they are not held back because of an identity that others may not know so much about or may not be as comfortable with. This also allows for supporting different networking opportunities in communities, primarily through employee resource groups, but also through organizations outside, like the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. We'll talk about a lot of different ways you can network with professionals outside of your organization during our program in July. Great. So I now have another poll for you. So we got a taste. Obviously, we're going to have a much deeper discussion on leading authentically and leading inclusively when we come together in July, if you join us. But my next question is around personal branding, because personal branding is a hot topic. It's often discussed, but a lot of people don't know what it really entails. How do I really do it? What am I supposed to do? Why is it important? And so my poll for you in this section, and then I will also take comments, is, do you feel you have a compelling personal brand? Like professionally, are you really known in some compelling way? Do you have a brand similar to, the brand that, Apple would have or something like that? So 80% of you said you don't feel like you have a compelling personal brand. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. So for those of you who have a brand, I'd love to hear, what is that brand and how is it proven valuable? How, what personal brand have you tried to cultivate and how has it helped you in your career? But for those of you who don't have a brand, feel that you don't have a personal brand, what do you feel like has been getting in the way? What do you feel like has been preventing you from having this brand that allows others to know you, allows you to advance, things like that? So let's drop some comments in the chat about, what do you feel like? What prevents you from having the brand that you'd like? Or, what is that brand? So, one person had talked about, being a disruptive innovator, and that's a great thing if you're in the innovation space, the entrepreneurship space, the intrapreneurship space. So entrepreneurship, but within larger organizations, that is super valuable. Another person mentioned being an inclusive relationship builder, and that connector brand can be really valuable. I have someone that I've known for about 17, 18 years, and this is his personal brand. He is an inclusive relationship builder, and it's super valuable to all of us who know him, because if I need a connection to something, I can reach out to, I can reach out to him, and I know that he may not know, but he will know people who, in almost any field, almost any need that I might have. And it has been, the crux of his career. He's very senior in finance, and he's not the best at building models. He's not the best at doing calculations, but he's great at getting to know people and connecting people, bringing deals together in that sense. Now, someone else said, I don't feel like I have a personal brand, and I need to first learn how to be authentic and be my authentic self. And this will then improve my ability to have a personal brand. And I love that, because that is why we teach leading authenticity and leading inclusively first. And then we teach you how to build that personal brand, because you do need to know yourself first. And when you know yourself, you can then leverage knowing yourself in order to build that brand and convey who you are, who you want to be to others. Great. So thank you for those comments and for participating in the poll. Now, in terms of the fundamentals of building a personal brand, let's talk about how we can do that and what it takes to build that personal brand. And there was a last comment about, I'd like to lead with authenticity and be inclusive, but I don't feel like I'm reaching, the correct audience. And so that's something else that we'll touch on as well. So, what you need to do first is establish what you want that professional identity to be. And it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from those of you on the webinar today, you're still kind of figuring that out. And that's exactly what we're going to do a deep dive on. There's exercises in the action plan that will help you figure out, what do you want that professional identity to be, right? So, my professional identity that I've tried to craft is an early stage entrepreneur. I love to take things from nothing to profitability, but once it's, I don't know, 5 to 10 million in profitability, it's usually time for me to hand off the business to the next leader, because I like to be that innovator, that creator from the ground up. Okay. And so people come to me when they have new business ideas, when they need advisors, when they need advice on fundraising. Do they fundraise? How much do they fundraise? When? Right? My value proposition is, if you want to go start your own thing, I am the person who can really help you do that. And that's because, for the last 18 years, I have been running, I had a small break in between the two, but I have been running startup organizations from literally zero, just me, nothing, up to, millions of dollars, in some cases, tens of millions of dollars in revenue, and substantial profitability. So that's my value proposition. That's my professional identity. But as you don't just have one identity, you have some sub-identities. Another one that I'm known for is I will kind of help anybody with anything that they need. We'll talk about this in a minute. I very much believe in, you've got to give before you ask. And sometimes it's not the same person. You're giving to one person and asking from another. But I'm the kind of person that if you reach out to me on LinkedIn with a short question, I will be happy to, do my best to respond to you. And I'll ask Jacqueline to put a link to my LinkedIn in the chat at some point. And I think we also have a QR code, so that if any of you want to connect with me, whether you're watching this live or you're watching the recording, feel free, connect. I'd love to learn more about what you're doing, what your projects you're passionate about, where you hope to go, and hopefully we can work together either in this July or in future programs to help you with building that brand. Or maybe you just have a question unrelated to this program. I am happy to answer that to the best of my ability, if it's an area in which I am, I have some expertise. And so Jacqueline just put the link to my LinkedIn in the chat for all of you. Once you figure out that professional identity and value proposition, you then want to consistently convey that across various platforms, in person and digitally. Okay. So yes, it is important. I'm not a huge fan of social media broadly, but LinkedIn is super important. Writing articles, I gained a lot of notoriety in my first business because I was in the media a lot. And so, having that consistent image online, whether it's in news reports or blogs or vlogs or LinkedIn, is important, but that same message needs to be your brand offline. And by creating this consistent image that's reinforced both in person and online, you then generate heightened visibility, and that gives you heightened credibility. People see you commenting and talking on the same types of topics, and you gain notoriety as somewhat of an expert. Once you gain that credibility, that opens up new career opportunities. Headhunters come across you, or senior executives looking for someone for their team come across you. And it also opens up networking opportunities, being invited to conferences, sometimes being invited to speak to conferences. And so this is why this personal branding is so important. And it's not something that can happen overnight. It's something that, we'll put together a plan and we will work towards for quite some time, for, the next few years, for you to really establish that brand. You want to leverage some personal stories and experiences. And if you do our program, we're going to use something called Clifton Strength Finders. Some of you may have done it before, but we are real believers in highlighting your strengths and not focusing too much on your developmental objectives. Obviously, there's certain things you need to overcome and that you need to get better at. But the best leaders that I see figure out what their strengths are and they lead from there. And they complement their strengths with other people on their team. And so, for example, within my personal brand, Shawn is not known for organization, but Shawn has developed a great team around him that is excellent in organization, that can be very supportive to him, because I recognize that's a weakness, and I'm in my 40s, and it's unlikely that weakness is going to become a strength, in the rest of my career over the next 20 years. And so, I really want to surround myself with those who can complement my weaknesses with their strengths. So we'll define the brand, we'll have an online and offline presence, engage with your audience in person and online, and you'll be getting feedback and adapting this brand. It's not a one-time deal, it's a constant evolution. In terms of career development, something that I like to really focus on is what are your short and long-term goals? And, really getting serious about your short-term goals, your long-term goals, and how we connect the two. And, if they're completely divorced from each other, then maybe the short-term goal needs to change, right? We need there to be continuity so that in each role that you have or each educational program you participate in, you are working towards those long-term goals. And so once we can figure out the long-term goal, we can not only figure out the experiences you need from a professional standpoint, but also the skill sets that you need to work on developing and the relationships that are critical that you need to start building, whether within your current organization or within other organizations or both. So that then we can have that career roadmap of, okay, this is where I want to be in 2 to 3 years. This is where I want to be in 5 or 6 years. This is where I want to be in 10, 20, 30 years. And so it's not left to chance or what opportunities kind of come your way, but instead you are empowered to build the career you want to do. And as LGBTQ plus individuals, we do have some unique challenges in career development. For example, there may be an international opportunity that could be great for your career, but you're in a serious relationship and gay marriage is not recognized in these countries. And in fact, gay relationships are perhaps illegal in this country. And so we need to think about whether or not to take those jobs in a way that others who are not in the LGBTQ plus community might not have to, okay? But there are opportunities as LGBTQ plus leaders and future leaders in that we can have mentoring and sponsorship relationships that our straight colleagues might not have the opportunity to build because we are part of a community that is tight-knit and that wants to support each other. And so this brings us to the idea of mentorship. Mentorship are people who are not in your direct reporting line. They're not your sponsor. Your sponsor is somebody 1, 2, 3 levels above you who sees your potential and wants to help you get promoted within your organization to reach your full potential. Mentors are more experienced leaders, usually 2, 3, 4 levels above you, who can help you broadly navigate your career path, sometimes within a single organization, sometimes across organizations. So it's important. Most people want to have a sponsor in their organization who can help them advance within that organization. And then they also want to have one or more mentors, maybe one within the organization, one outside, but in the field that they're passionate about, that can provide them that support, that advice, that advocacy to help them, kind of fulfill the career plan that we developed, get the skills that they need, build the relationships, think through how each position will impact their progress towards their long-term goals. And mentors can help you, as I mentioned, not only with developing skills, but also with developing confidence and relationships and learning to be a leader and refining your personal leadership style and doing so inclusively and authentically. And also making sure that you are contributing to the best of your ability to have impact in your organization and that you're doing so in a way that you'll be recognized for those contributions. Finally, I wanted to talk in the last couple of minutes here about networking. And so this is about building both professional and personal relationships. Networking is not only professional. Some of the best relationships I had were people who started just as personal friends, but then there was a way that we could do something together. You can do online networking, particularly through LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is not alone going to suffice. You need offline networking opportunities. And our program in July is an opportunity to have an offline networking opportunity with other like-minded LGBTQ plus professionals. And so you really want to expand those personal and professional connections to create more opportunities, as well as to build a support system where you can support others and others can support you. And, successful networking is not about you knowing 900 people. Okay? Because you can't know 900 people well. You can't know 900 people to the extent that they're all going to be able to help you at any given time. more successful networking strategies is you are really deeply connected to 30, 40, 50 people. And you're so connected to those 30, 40, 50 people that each of them have an additional 30, 40, 50 people that they would be happy to connect you with if they aren't able to assist you with something you need personally or professionally. And so then, depending on if it's 30, 40, or 50 that you know, and 30 or 40 or 50 that they know, you end up being connected to 900 or up to 2,500 people, but you have a smaller network that you are really close to, that you really stay in touch with, that you work hard with, to build that relationship, to be there for them, to give before you ask. You're truly genuine, but you're proactive in following up, leveraging both technology and analog. For example, I still send holiday cards to celebrate the end of the year to a couple hundred people that are in my pretty close network, more than my innermost 30 or 40, but because I just want to, it's my chance to connect with them once a year, let them know what my family is up to and hear what they are up to as well. And then I'm always building that network, and we'll go through different conferences and events specific to the LGBTQ plus community that could be helpful. So that's all of the prepared content. Again, this was just a very quick taste. This is a 4-day program, and I only had about 30 minutes, but I wanted to give you a taste of the kinds of things that we'll be covering. And so I'm going to stop sharing here because we are going to now move into the Q&A session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shawn, for that comprehensive overview of what people can expect from our programming. I want to now just remind everyone that if you have any questions for Shawn, to please put them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure to triage those to Shawn. And if we don't get to them, we will provide contact information for follow-up. So my first question, Shawn, for you is, how do LGBTQ plus leaders balance authenticity with professional expectations?
Yeah, so certainly, living authentically does not mean oversharing. Right. And so, we all, I think, know, and we can certainly talk about this at greater length, that there are certain things that are just not appropriate to speak about at work. Right. So, a lot of times, you probably shouldn't speak about, bars that you are going to necessarily. Not that there's anything wrong. Like, I go to gay bars, many people in the community do, but you probably don't want to be talking about your drunken escapades at the bar, right? That's not professional. But you can live authentically and be authentic and be like, I had a great time on Friday night. I went out with, 10 close friends of mine. There was a pride celebration, right? All of that is appropriate. But you don't need to get into, and then we started doing, tequila shots. And, after the tequila shots, we went to this other bar and things got really crazy there, right? So it's about sharing things that are important to you in your life, but knowing that in the professional context, these are your colleagues, not necessarily your friends. And so, being able to say my partner, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, whatnot is totally appropriate. But going into, sort of the more personal aspects of those relationships, or the more personal aspects of what you did, is something that would be crossing a boundary.
That's a great point, Shawn, about finding that fine line between what's appropriate and, what might not be the best to share in that context. And kind of building off of that a little bit, that seems like something that might be a skill that is, learned over time, or you talk to some mentors about, just kind of figuring out the office culture, the work culture you're in, and what's appropriate and what's not. So we're also kind of getting this question in the chat of, what is some advice for someone in the LGBTQ plus community who's starting off their career in business? Do you have any advice that they should kind of consider right at the start of their career?
Yeah. So one thing I would say is that whatever organization you go into, don't make any assumptions, positively or negatively, about that organization. I have been early in my career, I've worked in a number of different companies, and I have been in some that were, even 20 years ago, were extremely supportive of the full LGBTQ plus kind of rainbow, and embraced everything, and had, events that celebrated all different identities within the community. And then I've been in other places where people would make jokes that were homophobic, inappropriate jokes. And so don't go in assuming, oh, this is an engineering firm. They're probably not going to accept me, or this is a hardcore finance job. They're probably not going to accept me, or hey, this is a creative marketing agency. I can be super like out and about, because every organization has its own culture. And while they can somewhat be influenced by the industry that they're in, we just as we don't want others to make assumptions about us, we shouldn't make assumptions about the people in an organization before we go into it. What I find to be most useful, especially where we are today, and particularly if you're in larger metropolitan areas, is for many people, it's not a big deal that you're LGBTQ plus. So don't necessarily feel like you need to make it a big deal. What I do is, if I want to like just let someone know I'm gay, I just say, oh, my husband and I were in Mexico for Memorial Day weekend visiting my in-laws, right? And it's just, you would tell me you and your wife went to, Italy for, a 20th wedding anniversary. So I'm telling you, me and my husband, we went to Mexico. So, if you decide, and it's always your choice, but if you decide you want to, share with your colleagues that you're in a same-sex relationship, or you have a gender identity that is different from the gender that you were assigned at birth, just do those in sort of as much of a sort of typical run-of-the-mill way, because if you make a big deal out of it, then other people think, oh, this is a big deal, this is something to think about. But if you're natural and appropriate in your approach, and it seems like no big deal to you, then it's likely that those around you, there are always exceptions, but they will simply accept it as the way things are and move on with their life. And then if there is a LGBTQ plus employee resource group, even if it's not very strong, get involved. You can make that group what you want it to be, and you will then find out. I mean, one company that I was in, I never would have known that one of the C-level executives was openly gay, just because I was so far below the C-suite that I just never, this was not a C-level executive who gave a lot of speeches, so I never would have known that he was gay. But he was at the LGBTQ plus employee resource group and was very clear that, he had a husband, and was really proud. And he ended up being a sponsor of mine in the organization and helping me move up, and many other LGBTQ plus youth. I never would have made that connection without going to the employee resource group.
Perfect. That's some great advice. And it kind of leads to our next question, which almost kind of draws on the last example you just gave about someone in senior leadership part of the community. How do you navigate a workplace that is encouraging of inclusivity at the top level, but maybe middle leadership is a bit more hostile? How would someone kind of navigate that situation?
Yeah, obviously, this is something that, to give you the best advice, I'd want a little more information. I'd need to learn a little bit more about that. But what I would say is that if senior leadership truly is dedicated to this, and you are meeting with hostilities in the middle level management, then I think you want to gently look for ways to address this. And so it might just be an exploratory conversation with HR. Hey, you don't want to come to HR with threats and things like that, because that ruins the employee-employer relationship. If you need to take drastic action, you'll do that later with an attorney or whatever. Come to HR with, hey, I just wanted to ask some questions. I had some concerns. I just wanted to share with you and get your feedback on. And HR, their antennas go up, right? Their job is to keep everybody safe in the workplace, to keep the company compliant. And so I would start there and see if you just explain some things that had happened that were surprising and concerning to you. Not, oh my God, I was dramatically offended and I don't think I can continue working here. Start with just a softer approach, and you can ratchet up your levels of concern if you're not getting responses, but give people some grace that they can correct their behavior, because sometimes this is not intentional. It may be how they were raised, where they were raised, things like that, and they may just need some re-education that HR can help them with. And so that's something that I would look at. If you go to the employee resource group and there are, if your company has one and there are senior LGBTQ plus leaders, I wouldn't bring it up at a cocktail reception. Instead, I would say, I would go up, I'd meet them, I'd introduce myself, and I would say, there's something that is a little concerning or odd to me, would there be 15 minutes I could grab on your calendar to come and meet with you and talk for a second about that? And they'll probably say, yeah, my assistant so-and-so, and, get time on my calendar. And so then you could go do that. That's another option. But I would say, the more civil your approach is, the better results, in my experience, you are likely to get. Because if you meet hostility with hostility, then people can just be like, oh, the two of these people or these two groups of people, they just, they're like oil and water. But if you're like very, poised, and the other person, the person or people in middle management are very hostile to you, then it really makes it look like here's the professional and these people are behaving unprofessionally.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you gave a few different strategies people can incorporate. And I'm sure during the program itself in July, these questions and working on strategies to kind of make a workplace more inclusive, or what to do when it isn't, will be addressed. So thank you, Shawn. And kind of along the same lines, it seems like we have a couple of people here today who are leaders in their networks and in their organizations who want to support LGBTQ employees more than they currently are. So what can leaders do to support and reach the LGBTQ community in their organization?
Yeah. So I think that first and foremost is communicating throughout the organization that just as we have people from different religious backgrounds and different genders and different ethnicities, that we also have people from different sexual orientations and gender identities, and setting it the very clear expectation that we treat everyone here with respect. We allow people to bring their full selves to work. We understand that some of you, this may not be something that you right now are comfortable with, and that's okay, right? Because not everybody is going to be comfortable with any, there's always going to be people who have biases against any group, but that what employers can expect of their employees is to treat everybody with the respect that they would demand, and that we allow everybody to bring their full self to work. And I think providing some examples of the type of things that we, things like making sure that LGBTQ plus employees feel empowered to bring, if you allow dates at the holiday party, that LGBTQ plus employees should feel more than comfortable to bring a same-sex partner or, date to a holiday event. Or giving some examples of, if somebody mentions, they were doing something over the weekend and mentions they were doing it with a same-sex partner, that's totally appropriate. Or if somebody mentions that, they were born male, but they identify as female, that isn't a normal and appropriate experience that people have. And so I think creating some anecdotes that are illustrative of not just saying we expect you to respect everyone, but here are examples of the type of things that you very well may see in the workplace that we expect you to be respectful of, because that really makes it more actionable for non-LGBTQ plus employees, who probably most of them want to be supportive, but it makes it easier for them to understand, what does being supportive actually mean? What does being respectful actually mean? And I've seen companies design little videos with like animations that will show some of these interactions and show kind of the right way to engage and inappropriate ways to engage, because then you're really elevating the skills of your employees to be as supportive as they can be of the LGBTQ plus community.
Perfect. That's a great point about providing examples, things that are actionable that these organizations can implement. So now we're going to shift for the last couple questions to questions targeting specifically what are expectations for the programming. So the first one for you, Shawn, is this program only for people in the for-profit industries? Will someone working in a nonprofit benefit from this program?
Absolutely. This is appropriate for people in the public sector, the nonprofit sector, and the for-profit sector. So on our networking panel, we are going to have people from all three sectors represented. We're going to use examples throughout the program that apply to nonprofits and public sector, as well as some examples from the private sector. And I've been doing professional development and professional and educational development at Harvard for 4 or 5 years now. And in every one of our programs that I've done across a number of different topics, we've always had people from all different professional backgrounds, including public and nonprofit sectors. And we know that coming in, so we craft examples and anecdotes to make sure that the content is relevant to everyone who's in attendance, not just people from for-profit companies. And even within for-profit companies, we will have examples from smaller startup entrepreneurial examples and from bigger, larger corporations.
Perfect. And that kind of also ties into one of the main things we hear from past participants of our programs is they love the diversity also in the industries that people in the programs kind of show up with. So we have people across industries, people from different countries, different states, different levels in their organization. And that really kind of adds to the networking experiences and the dialogue that occurs in these programs. So that's great to hear. And my last question we have for you, we have time for one more, is how will this program contribute to community advancement for LGBTQ plus individuals?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, this program will empower people personally, professionally, and organizationally. So professionally, it's important to feel comfortable that you are not defined only by your LGBTQ plus identity, right? Like, I mean, there are many different things I do in my life. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm married. I'm gay. I like college football. There's many different identities that we all carry, personal identities and professional identities. So from a personal perspective, I think that will help you, like when we're looking at things like personal branding or bringing your full self to work, of how do you fully represent yourself as an LGBTQ plus individual at work, but not have that be the only thing that defines you, because maybe you're an excellent coder or you're a great salesperson, and those are important parts of your identity too. And so on a personal level, helping people figure out where does sexual orientation and gender identity fit within my broader profile, because none of us want to be the token gay person or trans person in an organization. We want to feel that that's a component of our identity, but it doesn't solely define us. In terms of professionally, I think, when you leave, you'll have a really good sense of where you want to go in your career and the step-by-step things you need to do and the sponsors and mentors you need to help you get there. So I think that folks will leave the program with a really clear professional roadmap. And then in terms of the organization, people will be in a position to go back to their organization and enhance that organization by sharing everything that they've learned with their colleagues who may be straight allies or members of the LGBTQ plus community, because our goal with this program is to make you a leader who can go into your organization and make that organization, even the ones that are great, can always be better. Right. And so we want to empower you to be a leader on behalf of the LGBTQ plus community, but on behalf of other groups and other facets of your business as well. But the goal here is to, through empowering individuals, help to strengthen organizations and make them more inclusive, more welcoming, but also have higher retention rates, better mental health. And so there's a real, payoff for the companies that might sponsor you or send you to this program, because you're going to be able to have a dramatic impact on the organization after 4 days at Harvard.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Shawn, for all of your insightful responses. And thank you to you all so much for all your thoughtful questions. I'm now just going to share a bit more information about Shawn's LGBTQ plus leadership program, Leading with Pride. If you'd like to learn more about these topics from Shawn and our other expert instructors, make sure to join us on campus from July 15th to July 18th for a 4-day program. Make sure to register by July 7th, as Shawn mentioned earlier. However, spots are limited, so we recommend registering as early as possible. Feel free to scan this QR code on your screen, or my colleague just dropped the link in the chat. And if we weren't able to answer your question or if more arise, please email us at execdev@dce.harvard.edu, or you can call us at 617-998-8500. Make sure to follow Harvard Professional and Executive Development on social media to stay updated on programming, hear from past participants, and learn tips from our instructors like Shawn. Lastly, if you want to scan this QR code here, or there's a link in the chat, you can connect with Shawn O'Connor on LinkedIn. A brief reminder that this webinar will be sent to the email you used to register, and it will be on our event registration page and YouTube channel within a week. We thank you all so much for spending time with us this afternoon, and we hope to see you in our program in July.